Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. You are what you eat. Now, I know a lot of you have heard this saying before, but have you taken the time to truly reflect on what you are, what you eat means? When a lot of people think of this saying, you think of kind of the physical aspect of it, like if I eat a donut, then I'm gonna feel sluggish. I'm gonna gain weight. You know, it's not just that. It's not just the physical perspective. You got to look at how it affects your life in every single aspect because you are what you eat is literally applying to every single thing in your life. It applies everywhere. You're when you look at only the physical perspective, you're looking at it from like a one-dimensional view, right? But when you open, yourself to like a dimensional view, you see everything that gets affected by this. It affects your mental health and it affects your connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. On a day-to-day basis, what you eat will determine your outcome in the future. It can have that impact on your outcome in the future. If you're trying to get ahead in the dunya for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, your diet can and it will hold you back. Bad diet will affect your direct correlation to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, your ability to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because yes, when it affects your mental or when it affects your physical health, you're going to be more lazy in salah, right? It's going to be harder to pray. But the mental aspect of it as well, you're going to be less mentally present. You're going to have less focus, etc., right? You got to look at things from a multi-dimensional view. Reflecting upon words is one of the best things you can do. When you look at something, truly reflect on its meaning. I want to tell you guys a story about how diet affected my life directly. I was in my high school, college years, back in this time. I used to play long hours on the computer, and my diet used to be like, I used to eat a lot of candy. I used to eat a lot of junk dessert like ice cream and popsicles and stuff. I literally used to have like a mini fridge. Like you can still see this same mini fridge right here, like this mini fridge and stuff. I used to pack that with like Mountain Dews in the fridge. Like I had a whole thing of Mountain Dews just sitting on the side. And then in the freezer, I had like a bunch of popsicles and ice cream and stuff. And then banquet meals. And I think I just look back at that and I'm like disgusted by myself. I'm like, why would I eat that stuff? Oh, it's just horrible. Like, but subhanallah, you learn. That's the beauty. And that's what I wanted to bring in this video to you guys. I want to share my perspective because I don't want you guys to fall into the same boat and make the mistakes that I was making. If you're making the mistakes I'm making right now, then this is a sign to change and move on to a better, diet overall. But back to the story. I used to eat all this garbage, right? You could only imagine how I felt. I was miserable. And it seemed like I wasn't at the current moment because I was indulged in a bunch of instant gratification tasks, so it always seemed like my gratification was, my dopamine levels were always spiking constantly. But when your dopamine levels spike constantly, this is going to lead to a drop in the baseline, right? It kind of looks like a stock graph, I guess you'd say. Like it goes up, right, and then there's going to be a down and a low. And up and then low and then up and low and you keep going and it's going to get like lower, but it doesn't get higher, it gets lower. So it's like up and then lower low and then up and then lower low and then up and lower low. Like it literally just goes like a constant downfall. It drops your baseline level, and when your baseline level of dopamine gets dropped, this affects your overall mental health and affects everything else in your life. When you it leads to things like depression and such, having low dopamine levels, and that's not what you want to be in. Like I was in the state where I was just being consumed by all of these instant gratification things, and the video games being like a huge thing. It also affected my ability to perform in college, right? My mindset was different. I wasn't focused a lot on the result of how my outcome was going to be in college. I wasn't focused on my direction of life. I wasn't thinking about what's going to happen when I graduate, right? I wasn't thinking about these things. And of course, that impacted me. But you learn. And that's the important thing. And then you change. You learn, then you change. The thing is, my mindset was, again, completely different. It affected my ability to be able to perform. My grades were lower. I was barely passing classes. I even failed some classes. Now, later on in my college years, right? One of my friends ended up getting me into the gym. Like, they forced me to go to the gym one session, right? And I was like, nah, right? But they made me go. And after I got like a session done, kind of like built over time. It took a little bit of like, still, it took hardship in the beginning to go. Like, my friends are kept like they were going consistently, so they were trying to get me to keep going consistently, right? And I ended up still showing up. They taught me how to bench, deadlift, squat, etc. Of course, those kind of things take time. They take time to learn. But the point is I started to enjoy the process of the gym itself. I started to enjoy the actual like exercise itself, like the action of exercising, going through these movements, doing the bench press and doing squatting, deadlift, etc. Like doing all these movements and stuff. I like grew fond of it. I started to enjoy it. And after that, like my friends were also introducing me to some science-based YouTubers and such. And this kind of opened up the door for what my diet could look like in the future, right? My diet slowly started to improve over time. I was still eating a lot of junk food, but I had a big emphasis on the protein because my friends gave me a specific YouTuber to refer to, Jeff Nippard, which is a great science-based YouTuber, by the way. I would recommend, looking into his content for understanding the science-based things behind exercise. But the protein thing, right? The government recommends like maybe 50, 60 grams of protein a day. I can't remember the exact amount, but it was low. It was low. You could imagine how my diet was back then, like just eating a bunch of junk food, McDonald's, Burger King, box dinners, ice cream, popsicles, Mountain Dew, a lot of soda, candy. Basically a proteinless diet. It ended up making me feel like crap. I had a skinny, fat physique and everything. But when I got into the gym, I was like I was building up my physique over time. I was getting into recomp. So I was losing fat, I was building muscle. And the protein goals from this channel, right? Found out like after research that the protein goal is actually what you want to aim for is usually anywhere between 0.7 grams and 1 gram per pound of body weight. And that is nowhere near the government recommended amount or what I was eating. I was eating below the government recommended amount even. So you could only imagine how that affected my health, right? When you look at diet, right? It's like taking a premium car, for example, as a Mercedes, for example. Those things require premium gas. You can link premium gas to a good diet. Now imagine putting regular gas, which you'd link to a bad diet, into the car. You wouldn't notice at the beginning. The car would still function, still do its thing. But as you do this over time, what do you think is going to happen to the car? The car is going to start to not function properly. It's going to start to break down. There's going to be problems with the car, right? The same concept applies to our health. When we compound these things, like you don't think about it in the current moment, like, oh, it's just this one time I'm going to eat this, just this one time, But if this compounds over time and you're doing this over time as a habit, you could only imagine, right? If the regular gas is affecting the car like that, how would it affect us? It's going to lead us to health problems. It's going to which is going to lead to more, medical bills and everything and more problems overall. You don't want to deal with that. You don't want to have these health problems. Having good health is one of the most beautiful things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us with. especially in our younger years. We have to take advantage of this. We can't let our body has a right over us. We can't let this happen like through our bodies. I mean, imagine showing up to Allah on the day of judgment and with a bunch of health problems, a weak body, a belly and everything, your mental health just completely knocked off. Like imagine how that's going to end up turning out, right? You want to return your body in the best condition possible to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You don't want to deal with these long-term effects from the problems of the diet. But over time, as my diet choices got better, so did my habits. Diet has a direct impact on this stuff. It has a direct impact on what you're going to do in the future. I want to share a verse from the Quran with you guys. Let me just go ahead and pull this up here. Allah says in the Quran in Surah Al-Nahl, then eat what Allah has provided for you, which is lawful and good, and be grateful in the favor of Allah, if it is indeed Him you worship. Now, when we look at this verse, it's not just halal or haram food. That is the biggest thing to take away, but you can apply this ayah to your diet, what you eat. Allah has made so much food for us. He's made so many things lawful for us, and there's so much food that He has given to us, that food and drink that He's given us, that He's created for us, that, subhanAllah, like when you look at the vitamins and the antioxidants, everything in the food itself, you just do more research on the specific food, you're going to find so much wonders behind it. And you can't think but to help, subhanAllah. Like, take eggs for an example. Eggs is one of the biggest superfoods to exist. Like, just eating a couple eggs every day is going to have a huge effect on your output in the, just your everything, your health and your output in the future. I mean, eggs, like they have 13 different vitamins. They're packed with antioxidants. Improves muscle building, testosterone. One of the highest quality proteins you can eat. And you can't help but to think, subhanAllah, right? Subhanallah, like the things that Allah has created for us, like the food that He's made for us is the ultimate fuel for our bodies to perform at our ultimate capacity, right? So why would it make sense to eat something that Allah has not provided for us? To eat the things people in the, everywhere like are making ultra processed foods. Like you have this garbage in today's food industry, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. Ultra processed. Like the banquet meals back then, they're cheap $1 meals, but it's not even real food. All that stuff was made in a lab. The food itself was made in a lab. The ingredients in that food was made in a lab. Imagine you're literally eating a lab experiment for food instead of real food that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has provided for fuel for our bodies. To worship Him better. You can only imagine how that stuff is going to compound long term. So next time before you reach for that candy bar, before you reach for that ice cream, before you reach for that popsicle, or even think about going eat out for fast food and such, think about that. Think about how it's going to affect you in the long term. When you shift your mindset from the long-term perspective, it's going to change how you look at things. Remember, your diet equals the outcome of your habits, your day-to-day, your future, your health, not your mental and physical health, your connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It has effect on all these things. Remember, health is wealth. Invest in it.